You're a thief, Latoya. Your kind never belonged here. Victoria Langley's venomous shout echoes through her Manhattan penthouse, branding Latoya Jackson, a 28-year-old black maid, as a criminal in front of the city's elite. Humiliated and cuffed for a crime she didn't commit, Latoya's world crumbles. Her sick mother and college-bound young brother depend on her. But she holds a secret that could shatter the Langley's empire, a $40 million lottery win. Fueled by rage and resilience, she teams up with an enigmatic figure to expose a web of lies, turning the tables. This heartwarming story of justice will grip you until the end. Share where you're watching from and rate this tale from 1 to 10 in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories that'll keep you hooked. Victoria Langley's voice sliced through the penthouse's hum, her manicured finger jabbing at Latoya Jackson's chest. The Manhattan elite froze, champagne flutes suspended mid-sip, eyes darting like vultures scenting blood. Latoya, 28, stood rigid in her starched maid's uniform, her pulse hammering in her ears, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The air in the opulent dining room thickened, the chandelier's gleam mocking her as Victoria's accusation echoed off marble walls. The missing diamond necklace, worth 50 grand, was the spark, and Victoria was pouring gasoline. "Mrs. Langley, I didn't—" Latoya's voice cracked, her hands trembling as she gripped the serving tray. "Save it," Victoria snapped, her pearl earrings glinting as she stepped closer, her breath hot with wine. "You think you can sneak around my home, pilfering my jewels? I saw you near my vanity." Her words were a whip, each one landing harder, drawing gasps from the crowd. A man in a tuxedo coughed. A woman in red clutched her pearls, their stares pinning Latoya like a specimen under glass. "I was cleaning, ma'am. I never touched." Latoya tried again, her voice steady but low, her Harlem roots grounding her against the storm. "Don't lie to me," Victoria cut her off, her eyes blazing with contempt. "You people always have an excuse." The room sucked in a breath at the venom in her tone, the word people dripping with disdain. Latoya's chest burned, her nails biting into her palms, drawing blood. She wanted to scream, to fling the tray at Victoria's smug face, but she held still, her mother's hospital bills and Marcus's tuition flashing through her mind. "Call the police," Victoria barked at her assistant, Margaret, who nodded with a smirk, already dialing. "I want her out of here, now," the crowd murmured, their whispers a chorus of judgment. Latoya's knees buckled, but she locked them, refusing to crumble. Her eyes locked on Victoria's, a silent vow flickering in their depths. "Mrs. Langley, you're making a mistake," Latoya said, her voice low, sharp as a blade. Victoria laughed, a brittle sound that echoed through the penthouse. "A mistake? The only mistake was hiring you." She turned to the guests, her smile saccharine. "I'm so sorry for the disturbance, everyone. Please enjoy the evening." The police arrived in minutes, their boots heavy on the polished floor. Latoya's wrists stung as cold metal cuffs snapped shut, the officer's grip rough as he led her through the crowd. Faces blurred, pity, scorn, curiosity. But Latoya kept her chin high, her gaze cutting through Victoria's triumphant smirk. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of rage and fear. But her steps were steady, each one a defiance against the weight of their stares. As they reached the elevator, Margaret slipped something into Victoria's hand, a small, glittering object. Victoria's smile faltered for a split second, her fingers closing around it. Latoya caught the motion, her eyes narrowing, but the elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the scene. In the squad car, Latoya's breath hitched, her hands shaking in the cuffs. She thought of her mother, frail in a Harlem hospital bed, and Marcus, studying late under a flickering lamp. She'd worked herself raw for them, scrubbing floors, swallowing insults. And now this. Her fingers brushed the crumpled lottery ticket in her pocket, a foolish habit she'd kept for years. She hadn't checked it yet, hadn't dared to hope. But as the city lights blurred past, a spark of something fierce ignited in her chest. Victoria's accusation wasn't just a lie, it was a declaration of war. And Latoya wasn't about to surrender. Latoya's wrists burned under the cold bite of the handcuffs, the squad car's stale air choking her as Manhattan's neon glow streaked by. Her heart slammed against her ribs, each beat a mix of fury and fear, but her face stayed stone, eyes fixed on the back of the officer's head. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not now. Victoria's venomous words, "You're kind," cut deeper than the cuffs, slicing into memories of Harlem streets where she'd fought to be seen as more than a stereotype. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as she swallowed the scream clawing up her throat. The police station was a blur of fluorescent lights and clipped voices. An officer shoved a form across the desk, his pen tapping impatiently. "Sign here. You're being charged with theft." Latoya's fingers trembled, but she gripped the pen, her signature sharp and deliberate, a silent vow to fight. She caught her reflection in a grimy window, her maid's uniform wrinkled, her tight curls fraying, but her eyes burned with defiance. "You're wrong," she said, her voice low, slicing through the room's hum. The officer raised an eyebrow, but she held his gaze, unyielding. "Mrs. Langley will regret this." Her words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that made the officer pause, his pen stilling. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise, etched in the steel of her spine. Released on bail she couldn't afford, Latoya stepped into the night, the city's pulse loud against her ears. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, her 19-year-old brother, his voice tight with worry. "Sis, what happened? They're saying you stole something." "They're lying," she snapped, her breath fogging in the cold. "I'm coming home." She hung up, her chest tight, picturing her mother's frail hands, Marcus's textbooks stacked on their wobbly kitchen table. She wouldn't let Victoria's lie destroy them. In her cramped Harlem apartment, the door creaked shut behind her. The silence pressed in, heavy with the scent of antiseptic from her mother's bedside. Latoya sank onto the couch, her fingers brushing the lottery ticket in her pocket. She hadn't checked it, hadn't dared to dream. But now, with Victoria's accusation burning in her mind, she pulled it out, her hands steady despite the storm inside. The numbers stared up at her, 7, 14, 22, 29, 36. A ritual, a flicker of hope she'd clung to through years of scrubbing floors and biting her tongue. She opened her phone, the lottery app loading slowly, each second stretching her nerves taut. Her breath caught a sharp gasp as the numbers aligned. $40 million. Her vision blurred, not with tears, but with a fire that seared her doubts. She zipped the ticket into her purse, her fingers lingering on the clasp, as if sealing away a weapon. "They'll see," she whispered, her voice a blade in the dark. Victoria Langley's heels clicked against the penthouse's marble floor, the echo sharp in the now empty dining room. The guests had fled, their whispers of scandal trailing like smoke. She clutched the small, glittering Kuyen tie Margaret had slipped her during Latoya's arrest, its delicate diamond glinting accusingly under the chandelier's glow. Her pulse quickened, a flicker of unease slicing through her triumph. It was Olivia's, her daughter's, left near the vanity where the stolen necklace had vanished. Victoria's fingers tightened, her manicured nails digging into her palm, drawing a sting of pain. "Ridiculous," she muttered, shoving the earring into her purse. Her lips curled, dismissing the thought. Latoya was the thief, had to be. A Harlem maid with nothing to her name, always hovering too close to the family's wealth. Yet the earring gnawed at her, a splinter in her certainty. She poured a glass of Pinot, the liquid trembling as she raised it to her lips. Her eyes darted to the vanity, its mirrored surface reflecting her own taut expression. She called Richard, her husband, her voice clipped. "Check the security footage, now." Richard's sigh crackled through the phone. "Victoria, I'm in a meeting. The deal's falling apart. Can't this wait?" "No, it can't," she snapped, her grip on the glass tightening. "That girl stole my necklace, and I need proof." He grumbled but agreed, promising to review the tapes. Victoria paced, her silk dress rustling, her mind replaying Latoya's parting words. "You'll regret this." The defiance in those eyes, dark, unyielding, pricked at her, a needle under her skin. She shook it off, sipping her wine, but the unease lingered, sharp and cold. Margaret appeared, her face a mask of loyalty. "Ma'am, a letter came during the party." She handed Victoria an envelope, plain and unmarked, The words Langley's Secrets scrawled in black ink. Victoria's breath hitched, her fingers tearing it open. Inside a single line, the truth about your family will come out. No signature, no clue. Her heart thudded, a dull ache spreading through her chest. She crumpled the paper, tossing it into the trash, but her hands shook, betraying her. Some prank, she told Margaret, her voice sharp to cover the tremor. Get rid of it. Margaret nodded, but her eyes lingered on the trash, a flicker of curiosity Victoria didn't notice. Alone again, Victoria stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan's skyline glittering below. The city felt like a jury, watching, judging. She thought of Olivia, her daughter's erratic nights, her hollow eyes, the rehab stints she'd hidden from their social circle, the earring burned in her purse, a silent accusation. What if? No. She crushed the thought, her jaw tightening. Latoya was the problem, not Olivia. Yet as she drained her glass, the wine bitter on her tongue, a shadow of doubt crept in. Latoya's face flashed in her mind. Those eyes, that vow. Victoria's fingers brushed the earring again, her pulse racing. She'd made an example of the maid, but at what cost? The phone rang, Richard's name on the screen. Her heart leapt, expecting answers, but the call would have to wait. Something heavier was coming, and she felt its weight closing in. You think you can humiliate me and walk away? Victoria Langley's voice hissed through her clenched teeth, her heels stabbing the cracked pavement outside Latoya's Harlem tenement. Her silk scarf fluttered as she stormed toward the building, her pulse pounding with a mix of guilt and fury. The earring, Olivia's not Latoya's, burned in her purse, a splinter in her conscience, but she shoved it down, her jaw tight. Latoya's defiance at the police station, those words, "You'll regret this," clawed at her, a blade she couldn't shake. She had to fix this, not for Latoya, but for her own reputation. The whispers at the gala were already spreading, tainting her perfect image among Manhattan's elite. Victoria banged on the chipped door, her knuckles stinging. No answer. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the peeling paint, the flickering bulb overhead. This was Latoya's world, grimy, small, unworthy. She knocked again, harder, her voice sharp. Latoya, open this door! A neighbor's curtain twitched, and Victoria's cheeks flushed, her nails digging into her palms. She wasn't here to beg. She was here to control the damage. The door creaked open, revealing Marcus, Latoya's 19-year-old brother, his lanky frame filling the doorway. His eyes, dark and wary, mirrored Latoya's defiance. She's not here, he said, his voice flat, his hand gripping the doorframe. Don't lie to me, boy, Victoria snapped, stepping closer, her perfume clashing with the apartment's antiseptic tang. I know she's hiding. I need to speak with her. Now. Marcus's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists. She's not hiding. She's at the hospital with Mom. His words were a slap, his glare cutting through her. You got what you wanted. Leave us alone. Victoria's lips parted, but no words came. The hospital? She pictured Latoya's mother, frail, bedridden, a detail she'd overheard from Margaret. Her chest tightened, a flicker of unease snaking through her. I didn't mean for things to escalate, she stammered, her voice softer, calculated. I came to apologize, to make this right. Marcus laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the dim hallway. Apologize? You called the cops on her. You called her a thief in front of everyone. His voice rose, sharp and raw. You think you can just show up and fix that? Victoria's nails bit deeper, her smile forced, tight as a wire. I may have been hasty. I want to offer compensation, a settlement. She can have her job back. Her words were smooth, a practiced lie, but her eyes darted, searching for Latoya's shadow. She doesn't want your job, Marcus shot back, stepping forward, his frame looming. And she sure as hell doesn't need your pity. He slammed the door, the sound ringing in Victoria's ears. Her hands shook, rage and doubt warring inside her. She turned, nearly tripping on the uneven steps, her mind racing. Latoya wasn't broken. She was defiant, dangerous. And that earring, that cursed earring, whispered truths Victoria didn't want to face. Back in her Bentley, Victoria gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She called Margaret, her voice low, venomous. "Find her. I want to know where she is, what she's doing." Margaret's reply was clipped, eager. "Already on it, ma'am. I've got eyes in Harlem." Victoria's gaze flicked to the crumpled letter in her purse, the one about Langley's secrets. Her throat tightened, her fingers brushing the earring again. She'd meant to bury this mess, but Latoya's absence, Marcus's defiance, and that damn note were unraveling her control. She started the car, the engine's hum a weak shield against the storm brewing in her chest. She drove back to Manhattan's glittering core, the skyline mocking her with its cold perfection. Latoya was out there, planning something, and Victoria felt the ground shifting beneath her. She'd find her, silence her, before those eyes, those burning, unyielding eyes, could undo everything she'd built. "You think you can break me, Victoria?" Latoya Jackson muttered under her breath, her voice a low growl as she leaned against the hospital room's chipped doorframe. Her mother's labored breathing filled the small space, each wheeze a knife in Latoya's chest. The Harlem hospital's antiseptic stench clung to her skin, but her eyes burned with a fire that hadn't dimmed since Victoria's accusation. Her fingers clutched the lottery ticket in her pocket, its edges worn from her touch, a secret worth $40 million that could change everything, or destroy it all if it fell into the wrong hands. She adjusted her mother's blanket, her hands steady despite the storm inside. The machines beeped, a relentless reminder of the bills piling up. Marcus's textbook sat on a plastic chair, his notes scrawled in the margins, a testament to his dream of becoming an engineer. Latoya's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she pictured Victoria's smug face, her venomous words, "You're kind," echoing like a slap. She wouldn't let that woman take this from her, not her family, not her fight. Her phone buzzed, Marcus texting from their apartment. "Sis, that Langley woman came by, acting all sorry. Don't trust her." Latoya's lips curled into a bitter smile. Victoria's fake apology was a trap, a leash to pull her back into submission. She typed back, "Stay sharp. I've got this." Her fingers lingered on the screen, her pulse quickening. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her mother's next breath, for Marcus's future. At the hospital cafeteria, Latoya sat alone, a cold coffee in her hands, her mind racing. She'd met James Carter at the police station, a black investigative journalist with eyes that carried the same scars she did. He'd been burned before, framed and fired, his career gutted by lies. "I see you," he'd said, his voice low, steady. "This isn't just about you. It's bigger." His words stuck, a spark in the dark. She'd told him about the lottery win, her voice barely a whisper, her trust a gamble. He'd nodded, his jaw tight, promising to keep her secret and dig for the truth. She pulled out her phone, opened the lottery app, and checked again. The numbers hadn't changed, 7, 14, 22, 29, 36, 40 million. Her breath hitched, her fingers trembling as she zipped the ticket back into her purse. It wasn't just money, it was power, a weapon she'd wield carefully. She called James, her voice sharp, urgent. "You said you could find out what's really going on with the Langleys. Start now." "Already on it," James replied, his tone clipped, focused. "Meet me tomorrow. Bring cash. We'll need resources." Latoya nodded, though he couldn't see her. She stood, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, and walked back to her mother's room. Her mother's eyes fluttered open, weak but warm. "You're too strong for them, baby," she whispered, her voice a rasp. Latoya's throat tightened, her hands squeezing her mother's frail fingers. "I know, Mama," she said, her voice steady. A vow. She stepped into the hall, her eyes catching a nurse pushing a cart. A young black woman like her, head down, working through the grind. Latoya stopped her, slipping a 20 into her hand. "For your break," she said, her smile small but fierce. The nurse's eyes widened, a spark of gratitude flashing. Latoya walked on, her shoulders squared, her heart pounding with purpose. She wasn't broken. She was building something, brick by brick, with every step. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever." Her pulse spiked, her fingers tightening around the phone. Victoria's people? Someone else? She shoved it into her pocket, her eyes narrowing. Let them come. She had a secret worth millions, a brother worth fighting for, and a mother who needed her. The hospital's exit loomed, the night outside dark and sharp. Latoya stepped toward it, her breath visible in the cold, her shadow stretching long and unyielding. Back off, or I'll make sure everyone knows your dirty little secret. Olivia Langley's voice was a venomous hiss, her bloodshot eyes glaring at Latoya Jackson through the diner's greasy window. The neon sign buzzed above, casting a red glow on Olivia's pale face, her trembling hands clutching a cigarette. Latoya, 28, stood frozen on the Harlem sidewalk, her pulse hammering, her fingers tightening around the pawnshop receipt in her pocket. Proof that Olivia, Victoria's 25-year-old daughter, had sold the stolen diamond necklace. The air crackled with tension, the late-night streets silent except for Olivia's ragged breaths. "You don't scare me," Latoya shot back, her voice low, sharp as a blade. Her jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she stepped closer, her sneakers scraping the pavement. Olivia's accusation stung, a reminder of the lottery ticket, $40 million hidden in her purse. How did she know? Latoya's heart raced, her eyes narrowing, searching Olivia's twitching expression for answers. "Don't play dumb," Olivia sneered, flicking ash, her nails chipped, her designer jacket rumpled. "I heard Mom talking. You're sitting on something big and I'll spill it if you don't drop this." Her words were a threat, but her voice shook, betraying her fear. Latoya's chest burned, her mind flashing to Victoria's fake apology, the receipt, the anonymous letter about Langley's secrets. Olivia wasn't just a spoiled addict. She was dangerous, a cornered animal ready to bite. "You sold that necklace," Latoya said, her voice steady, cutting. "I've got proof. You're not threatening me. You're begging." Her words landed like a punch, and Olivia's face paled, her cigarette dropping to the ground. "You don't know what you're messing with," Olivia snapped, stepping forward, her breath sour with liquor. "My family owns this city. You're nothing. Just a maid who got lucky." The word maid dripped with disdain, echoing Victoria's venom. Latoya's fists balled, her nails biting into her palms, drawing blood. She wanted to lunge, to wipe that smirk off Olivia's face. But she held still, her mother's hospital bills and Marcus's tuition anchoring her. "Keep talking," Latoya said, her smile cold, lethal. "Every word's another nail in your coffin." Olivia laughed, a brittle sound, but her eyes darted to the shadows where a figure lingered. Margaret, the Langley's loyal housekeeper, her face half hidden under a hood. Latoya's pulse spiked, her breath catching. Margaret, always lurking, always whispering in Victoria's ear. "You're in over your head," Olivia said, backing away, her voice low. "Margaret's watching. She knows things. Drop this, or you'll lose more than your job." Latoya's eyes flicked to Margaret, who turned and vanished into an alley, her footsteps quick, deliberate. Her heart pounded, a mix of rage and unease. Margaret wasn't just a bystander. She was complicit, a shadow pulling strings. Latoya's fingers brushed the receipt again, its edges sharp against her skin. Olivia's threat confirmed it. The Langleys were hiding more than a stolen necklace. She pulled out her phone, texting James Carter, the journalist she'd trusted with her secret. "Olivia just threatened me. Margaret's involved. We need to move fast." Her fingers shook, but her resolve was iron. She thought of her mother's frail hands, Marcus's hopeful eyes, the weight of $40 million she'd kept hidden. Olivia thought she could scare her into silence, but she'd miscalculated. Latoya turned, her sneakers pounding the pavement as she headed to meet James. Olivia's words echoed, but they didn't break her. They fueled her. The Langleys thought they could bury her, but she was digging up their lies, one receipt at a time. The diner's neon sign flickered behind her, its hum a faint warning in the night. Margaret's shadow lingered in her mind, a ghost she couldn't shake. Whatever the Langleys were hiding, Latoya was closer to it now, and she wouldn't stop until it was exposed. "You're digging your own grave, Latoya," Margaret's voice spat through the phone, her words sharp as a switchblade, catching Latoya off guard as she sat in the back booth of a Harlem diner. The greasy air clung to her skin, the hum of late-night chatter barely masking her pounding pulse. Latoya's fingers tightened around the pawn shop receipt. Proof Olivia Langley sold the stolen diamond necklace, its edges cutting into her palm. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as Margaret's threat echoed Olivia's from hours ago. The housekeeper's involvement wasn't a surprise, but her audacity sent a jolt of fury through Latoya's veins. She wasn't just fighting Victoria and Olivia anymore. Margaret was a new link in the Langley chain, and Latoya was ready to snap it. "Keep talking, Margaret," Latoya shot back, her voice low, lethal. "You're tying your own noose." She hung up, her breath hot, her eyes scanning the diner. James Carter slid into the booth across from her, his journalist's notebook worn, his eyes sharp with the same scars Latoya carried. His presence grounded her, a tether against the storm brewing in her chest. She slid the receipt across the table, her fingers steady despite the fire inside. "Olivia sold the necklace. Margaret's covering for her. They're scared." James's jaw tightened, his pen tapping the receipt. "This is big, but it's not enough. We need more." His voice was clipped, urgent, his gaze flicking to the diner's entrance, as if expecting Margaret's shadow. Latoya nodded, her heart racing. $40 million, her lottery secret, burned in her purse, a weapon she'd used to fund James's investigation. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a force, and the Langleys were about to feel it. They started with the pawn shop. The clerk, a wiry man with a nervous tic, flinched when James flashed his press badge. "Yeah, I remember her," he muttered, eyes darting. "Fancy girl, strung out, sold a diamond necklace. Paid cash, no questions." Latoya's pulse spiked, her nails biting into her palms. "Olivia." The clerk handed over a grainy security still, Olivia's face, hollow-eyed, signing the receipt. Latoya's lips curled into a fierce grin. "Got you," she whispered. James wasn't satisfied. "We need the bigger picture. Victoria's done this before." He pulled strings with a contact at the NYPD, digging into the Langley family's history. They found 3 other maids, black women, all fired by Victoria in the last 5 years, each accused of theft. Latoya's chest burned, her breath short. It wasn't just her, it was a pattern, a system of lies to protect the Langley's pristine image. She tracked down one ex-maid, Carla, in a Bronx tenement. Carla's eyes widened when Latoya explained, her hands shaking as she pulled out a faded letter. "Victoria fired me after a bracelet went missing. Said I stole it. Found it later in her daughter's room." Latoya's fist balled, her knuckles whitening. "Why didn't you fight?" Carla's laugh was bitter, her eyes hollow. "Fight with what? I had nothing. You do." Latoya's throat tightened, her mother's hospital bed flashing in her mind. Marcus's textbooks stacked high. She had something. 40 million reasons to keep going. She handed Carla a card with her lawyer Patricia's number. "You're not alone anymore," she said, her voice steady, a vow. James's phone buzzed, a tip from his NYPD source. A second anonymous letter, like the one Victoria received, had surfaced at a local paper. The Langleys buried more than jewelry. Latoya's heart leapt, her fingers brushing the first letter's words in her memory. Langley secrets. She and James raced to the newsroom, where a nervous intern handed over the note. Same handwriting, same threat. "The truth about your family will come out." Latoya's breath caught, her eyes locking with James's. "This isn't just about the necklace," she said, her voice low, fierce. "It's about what they've buried." They split up, James to chase the letter's source, Latoya to meet Patricia. The lawyer's office was sleek, all glass and steel, a stark contrast to Harlem's grit. Patricia's pen tapped as she reviewed the receipt, the security still, Carla's story. "This is enough for a civil suit," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "But if we're going for blood, we need everything. Dates, names, proof Victoria knew." Latoya nodded, her jaw tight. "Then we get it." She wired 50 grand from her lottery winnings to Patricia, her fingers steady, her heart pounding with purpose. The money wasn't just freedom, it was a battering ram. She thought of her mother's frail hands, Marcus's hopeful eyes, Carla's broken spirit. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was for every woman the Langleys had crushed. James called, his voice urgent. Found the letter's source. An old business partner of Richard Langley. Says Victoria covered up something big 10 years ago. Something tied to Olivia. Latoya's pulse roared, her fingers clutching the phone. What? Won't say over the phone. Meet me at his office. Bring cash. Latoya grabbed her purse. The lottery ticket's weight a silent promise. She stepped into the night, her sneakers pounding the pavement, her shadow sharp against Harlem's glow. Margaret's threat, Olivia's desperation, the letters. They were pieces of a puzzle, and Latoya was closing in. The Langleys thought they could silence her, but she was louder than ever, her heart a drumbeat of defiance. Her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Stop digging or your family pays. Her breath hitched, her eyes darting to the shadows. Margaret? Olivia? Someone worse? She forwarded the text to James, her fingers trembling, but her resolve iron. The Langleys were running scared, and Latoya was just getting started. You think the Langleys are saints? They're vultures. Daniel Reed's voice snarled, his weathered hands slamming a stack of yellow documents onto his cluttered desk. The former business partner of Richard Langley leaned forward, his eyes glinting with old grudges, as Latoya Jackson and James Carter sat across from him in a cramped Brooklyn office. Latoya's pulse thundered, her fingers gripping the pawn shop receipt, proof of Olivia's theft, while her heart raced from the anonymous threat on her phone. Stop digging or your family pays. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding as Reed's words cut through the stale air, each one a spark igniting the fire in her chest. What did they do? Latoya demanded, her voice low, sharp as a blade. Her eyes locked on Reed's, unyielding, her mother's hospital bed and Marcus's future anchoring her resolve. The lottery ticket, $40 million, burned in her purse, a secret weapon she'd used to fund this hunt for truth. Reed leaned back, his chair creaking, his lips curling into a bitter grin. 10 years ago, Victoria covered up a scam. Olivia, barely 15, siphoned thousands from their charity fund. Fake invoices, shell accounts. She was a kid, but she knew what she was doing. He shoved a document forward, a faded bank statement with Olivia's initials scrawled on a transfer. Victoria blamed a maid, black, like you, fired her, ruined her. Sound familiar? Latoya's breath caught, her nails biting into her palms, drawing blood. Her mind flashed to Carla, the ex-maid who'd lost everything to Victoria's lies. They did it before, she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. They've been doing this for years. Her chest burned, the weight of the Langley's pattern crashing down. Victoria's accusations weren't just personal. They were a system, a machine built to crush women like her. James's pen scratched furiously, his eyes narrowing. Why do you keep quiet? He asked, his voice clipped, his journalist's instincts sharp. Reed's grin faded, his hands shaking. They bought me off, threatened my family. I took the money and ran. He slid another paper across, a non-disclosure agreement signed in his shaky hand. But I kept copies, for insurance. Latoya's heart leapt, her fingers snatching the documents. Bank records, emails, a photo of the fired maid, her face worn, eyes hollow. This is it, she said, her voice steady, fierce. This buries them. She thought of her mother's frail hands, Marcus's textbooks, and the threat on her phone. The Langleys weren't just protecting Olivia. They were guarding a legacy of lies. You're playing with fire, Reed warned, his voice low, his eyes darting to the window. Victoria's got eyes everywhere. That housekeeper, Margaret, she's not just loyal. She's dangerous. Latoya's pulse spiked, her mind flashing to Margaret's shadow in the alley, her threat echoing Olivia's. Let them come, she said, her smile cold, lethal. She stood, her sneakers scuffing the floor, her hands clutching the documents like a sword. James nodded, his jaw tight, his notebook stuffed with damning notes. We take this to Patricia, Latoya said, her voice a vow. We sue them, all of them. Her lawyer's name was a lifeline, her $40 million a battering ram. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for Carla, for the maid 10 years ago, for every name the Langleys had erased. As they left, Latoya's phone buzzed again. No number, just words. You were warned. Her breath hitched, her fingers trembling, but she shoved the phone into her pocket. Reed's documents were heavy in her hands, a ticking bomb. The Langleys thought they could silence her, but she was about to scream loud enough to shatter their world. The Brooklyn street stretched dark and sharp before her shadow long, unyielding, as she stepped toward the fight ahead. You're done, Latoya. You'll wish you stayed in Harlem where you belong. Olivia Langley's voice was a shrill snarl, her eyes wild as she cornered Latoya in the dim hallway of her cramped apartment building. The air reeked of mildew, the flickering bulb overhead casting jagged shadows on Olivia's gaunt face. Latoya, 28, stood her ground, her pulse hammering, her fingers clutching the stack of documents from Daniel Reed. Proof of Olivia's theft and Victoria's decade-long cover-up. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as Olivia's words cut deep, echoing the same venom Victoria had spat at the gala. The lottery ticket, $40 million, burned in her purse, a secret that could save her or doom her if Olivia's threats went further. You're the one who's done, Latoya shot back, her voice low, sharp as a razor. Her sneakers scraped the linoleum as she stepped forward, her eyes locked on Olivia's, unyielding. I've got your signature on a pawnshop receipt, your face on camera. You stole that necklace, not me. Her words were a blade slicing through Olivia's bravado. The younger woman's hands shook, her pupils dilated, the stench of liquor on her breath mingling with her panic. You think you can ruin us? Olivia hissed, lunging closer, her chipped nails clawing at Latoya's arm. You're nothing, a maid playing hero. Her voice cracked, desperation seeping through. Latoya yanked her arm free, her skin stinging, her heart pounding with a mix of fury and fear. She thought of her mother's hospital bed, Marcus's textbooks, the anonymous threats. Your family pays. Olivia wasn't alone in this, and the realization hit like a punch. Back off, Latoya warned, her voice steady, her fists balled, nails biting into her palms. Or I'll make sure every paper in New York knows what you've done. Her threat landed, and Olivia's face paled, her lips trembling. But before she could retort, a shadow moved at the end of the hall. Margaret, the Langley housekeeper, her eyes cold, her hand gripping something metallic. Latoya's breath caught, her pulse spiking. A knife? A gun? Margaret's presence was a silent threat, her loyalty to the Langleys a chain Latoya hadn't yet broken. Olivia, let's go, Margaret barked, her voice low, commanding. She stepped closer, her boots heavy, her gaze pinning Latoya like a predator. You've caused enough trouble. Her words were ice, but Latoya caught the flicker of fear in her eyes. Margaret knew about the documents, the receipt, the truth closing in. Trouble? Latoya's laugh was sharp, cutting. You helped Victoria frame me. You've been cleaning up their messes for years. She stepped toward Margaret, her heart racing, her voice a whip. But I'm not your scapegoat. Margaret's hand twitched, the metal glinting, a utility knife, its blade catching the light. Latoya's stomach twisted, but she held her ground, her mother's frail hands flashing in her mind, Marcus's hopeful eyes fueling her. You don't know what you're up against, Margaret said, her voice low, venomous. Walk away, or your family won't be safe. The threat was a blade, sharp and real, and Latoya's breath hitched, her fingers tightening around the documents. She thought of the anonymous texts, the letters about Langley's secrets. Margaret wasn't just following orders. She was neck deep in the Langleys' lies. Try me, Latoya said, her smile cold, lethal. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her thumb hovering over James Carter's number. One call, and your whole house of cards falls. Olivia flinched, her eyes darting to Margaret, who took a step forward, the knife gleaming. Latoya's heart pounded, her knees locked to keep from shaking. She was cornered, outnumbered, but the $40 million in her name was a shield, and James's investigation was her sword. Suddenly, a door slammed down the hall. Marcus, his lanky frame charging forward, a baseball bat in his hands. Get away from my sister, he roared, his voice raw, his eyes blazing. Olivia yelped, stumbling back, and Margaret froze, the knife dropping to her side. Latoya seized the moment, shoving past Olivia, her documents clutched tight. We're done here, she said, her voice a vow, her eyes burning into Margaret's. She grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him toward the stairwell, her pulse roaring. The documents in her hand felt like dynamite, and Margaret's glare followed her like a shadow. The Langleys were desperate, and desperation made them dangerous. But Latoya wasn't running. She was charging toward the truth, and nothing would stop her now. The stairwell door slammed shut behind them, the echo sharp, her breath ragged as she clutched Marcus's hand, the documents heavy with the weight of justice. "You can't outrun us, Latoya." Margaret's voice echoed up the stairwell, her boots pounding like a war drum as Latoya and Marcus sprinted down the creaking steps of their Harlem tenement. Latoya's pulse thundered, her fingers clutching the stack of documents from Daniel Reed. Bank statements, emails, proof of the Langleys' decade-long lies. Her sneakers skidded on the worn linoleum, her breath hot and ragged, Marcus's baseball bat swinging in his grip beside her. The utility knife in Margaret's hand flashed in her mind, a glint of danger that pushed her legs faster. The lottery ticket, $40 million, burned in her purse, a secret fueling her fight, but the anonymous threat. "Your family pays," was clawed at her, a warning she couldn't shake. "Keep moving," Latoya hissed, her voice sharp, her eyes darting to Marcus's wide, panicked gaze. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white around the bat. They burst through the building's back door, the Harlem night swallowing them, the air sharp with diesel and fear. Latoya's heart pounded, her nails biting into her palms as she scanned the alley. Shadows moved, but no Margaret, no Olivia. Yet. She yanked her phone from her pocket, her fingers trembling as she dialed James Carter. "They're after us," she whispered, her voice low, urgent. "Margaret and Olivia. They know we've got proof." James's voice crackled, steady but tense. "Get to the diner. I've got something. Big." Latoya nodded, her chest tight, and grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him toward the neon glow of the diner 2 blocks away. Her mind raced. Reed's documents, the pawn shop receipt, Carla's testimony. They were close, so close, but Margaret's knife and Olivia's desperation were a noose tightening around them. At the diner, James waited in a corner booth, his notebook open, a grainy video paused on his laptop. Latoya slid in across from him. Marcus standing guard, his bat tucked under his jacket. Her breath hitched, her eyes locking on the screen. Olivia, hollow-eyed, handing the diamond necklace to a pawn shop clerk, her signature scrawled on the receipt. "This is it," James said, his voice clipped, his pen tapping the table. "But we need more to nail Victoria." Latoya's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding. "More?" Her voice was a blade, her fury spiking. "We've got her daughter on tape, bank records, a fired maid story." "It's not enough for a jury," James shot back, his eyes sharp, unyielding. "Victoria's got lawyers who'll bury this unless we tie her directly to the cover-up." He slid a new document across. A grainy email from 10 years ago. Victoria to Reed, ordering him to handle the maid blamed for Olivia's theft. Latoya's pulse roared, her fingers snatching the paper, her heart pounding with the weight of it. Victoria didn't just know. She orchestrated everything. "We need a witness," James said, his voice low, urgent. "Someone who saw it happen." Latoya's mind flashed to Carla, the ex-maid, her hollow eyes, her story of a stolen bracelet. "Carla," she said, her voice steady, fierce. "She knows more than she told us." She texted Patricia, her lawyer, wiring another 10 grand from her lottery winnings to track Carla down. Her fingers shook, but her resolve was iron. The money wasn't just power, it was a sledgehammer, and she was swinging it. They found Carla at a Bronx shelter, her hands trembling as she clutched a coffee mug. "I saw it," Carla whispered, her voice raw, her eyes darting. 10 years ago, Olivia took the charity money. Victoria caught her, but she blamed me. Margaret was there, helped her plant the bracelet in my bag. Latoya's chest burned, her nails digging into her palms, drawing blood. Margaret wasn't just loyal, she was the Langleys' enforcer, framing maids to protect their empire. "Will you testify?" Latoya asked, her voice low, her eyes locking on Carla's. Carla's hands shook, her mug clattering. "They'll come for me." "They're already coming for me," Latoya said, her smile cold, lethal. "But I've got something they don't. 40 million reasons to fight." Carla's eyes widened, a spark of hope flickering. She nodded, her jaw tightening. James's phone buzzed. A new tip from his NYPD contact. A security tape from the Langley penthouse, buried in their private server, showing Margaret planting evidence in a maid's locker 5 years ago. Latoya's heart leapt, her breath catching. "That's the final nail," she said, her voice a vow. She wired more money to Patricia, her fingers steady, her mind racing. The tape, Carla's testimony, Reed's documents, they were a guillotine blade, and Victoria's neck was on the block. But as they left the shelter, Latoya's phone buzzed. An unknown number, a photo this time. Her mother's hospital room, the curtain half drawn, a shadow in the doorway. Her stomach twisted, her breath short. Margaret. The threat was real, and it was closing in. "They're watching Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes blazing. Marcus grabbed her arm, his bat ready, his face fierce. "We end this," James said, his voice steel, his hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow we take it to court." Latoya nodded, her heart a drumbeat of defiance, her fingers clutching the documents like a lifeline. The Langleys thought they could scare her, break her, but they'd miscalculated. She wasn't running, she was charging, and the truth was her weapon. The Bronx night loomed, dark and sharp, her shadow stretching long as she stepped toward the fight of her life. "You thought you could bury me, Victoria." Latoya Jackson's voice sliced through the packed Manhattan courtroom, her eyes blazing as she stood at the plaintiff's table, her hands steady on the stack of damning documents. The air crackled, the judge's gavel still echoing from silencing the crowd's gasps. Victoria Langley sat across the room, her face ashen, her pearl earrings glinting like armor that had failed her. Latoya's pulse roared, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding as she faced the woman who'd branded her a thief. The lottery ticket, $40 million, burned in her purse. A secret she was about to wield like a blade, with James Carter and their evidence as her shield. "Your daughter stole that necklace," Latoya declared, her voice clear, lethal, as she slid the pawn shop receipt across the table. The projector flickered, casting Olivia's grainy image on the courtroom screen, her hollow eyes, her signature on the receipt for the stolen diamond necklace. The crowd murmured, a wave of shock rippling through the suited lawyers and curious onlookers. Victoria's lips parted, but no sound came. Her hands were trembling in her lap. Latoya pressed on, her words sharp, relentless. "You didn't just frame me. You framed Carla, Tanya, and Marla. Black maids you crushed to protect your family's lies." She held up Daniel Reed's documents. Bank statements, emails, proof of Victoria's cover-up of Olivia's theft 10 years ago. The courtroom buzzed, reporters scribbling furiously, their pens scratching like claws. Latoya's chest burned, her mother's frail hands and Marcus's hopeful eyes fueling her. "And Margaret," she said, her eyes locking on the housekeeper in the back. "You planted evidence to ruin us." Margaret flinched, her face paling, her hands twisting in her coat. "Lies!" she shouted, her voice cracking, but the judge's gavel slammed, silencing her. Latoya's lips curled into a fierce grin as James stepped forward, his voice steady, commanding. "We have a tape," he said, nodding to the bailiff. The screen shifted, showing Margaret slipping a bracelet into a maid's locker 5 years ago, her movements sly, deliberate. The crowd gasped, a woman in the gallery clutching her purse, a man coughing into his fist. Victoria lunged to her feet, her voice shrill. "This is outrageous. She's a nobody, a maid." Her words were a desperate stab, but they fell flat, the courtroom's eyes turning cold, judgmental. Latoya's heart pounded, her nails biting into her palms, drawing blood. She stepped closer to the stand, her sneakers silent, her presence towering. "Then let me tell you who I am," Latoya said, her voice a thunderclap. "I'm the woman who won $40 million. The room froze, a collective breath sucked in, reporters' pens halting. "I used it to fund this fight, to hire the best lawyer, to dig up your lies." She nodded to Patricia, who stood, her briefcase snapping open with a sharp click, revealing more evidence. Carla's testimony, the security tape, Reed's emails. "I'm not your victim anymore." Victoria's face crumpled, her hands clawing at the table, her eyes darting to Olivia, who sat hunched, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking. The gallery erupted, voices overlapping, cameras flashing. "Order!" the judge barked, his gavel pounding. Latoya stood tall, her eyes locked on Victoria's, unyielding. "You thought you could break me," she said, diagnosed, her voice low, cutting. "But you're the one who's broken." The judge's gavel fell again, but the room was electric. The crowd's whispers a storm. Patricia stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp. "The evidence is irrefutable, Your Honor. A pattern of racial discrimination and fraud." She slid the documents forward, her eyes cold. Victoria sank into her seat, her breath ragged, her empire crumbling under the weight of Latoya's truth. Latoya's heart raced, a mix of triumph and fury. She thought of her mother's hospital bed, Marcus's bat, Carla's hollow eyes. This wasn't just her victory, it was theirs. As the judge called for a recess, Latoya's eyes met James's, his nod a silent vow of solidarity. The Langleys were exposed, their lies laid bare. But the fight wasn't over. She stepped from the stand, her shoulders squared, her shadow sharp against the courtroom floor, a warrior ready for the final blow. "You're finished, Victoria!" Latoya Jackson's voice thundered through the Manhattan courtroom, her eyes blazing as she gripped the plaintiff's table, her knuckles whitening. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot, but it couldn't drown out the crowd's gasps as the verdict landed. Victoria Langley slumped in her seat, her face gray, her pearl earrings dull against the weight of defeat. Latoya's pulse roared, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as the truth, Olivia's theft, Victoria's decade-long lies, Margaret's complicity, crushed the Langley's empire. Her $40 million secret, once a burden, was now her triumph, funding the fight that brought them down. "Guilty," the judge declared, his voice sharp, final. "Mrs. Langley, you and your daughter will pay restitution to all plaintiffs, Latoya Jackson, Carla Evans, Tanya Brooks, and Marla Hayes, for wrongful termination and defamation." The courtroom buzzed, reporters' pens scratching, cameras flashing. Latoya's chest burned, her breath short as she thought of her mother's hospital bed, Marcus's textbooks, the other maid's hollow eyes. This was their victory, carved from her pain. Olivia sobbed, her head bowed, her hands cuffed as bailiffs led her toward a rehab facility, her addiction no longer a secret. Margaret, the housekeeper, stood rigid, her face ashen as she faced charges for evidence tampering. "You set me up," she hissed at Victoria, her voice a desperate stab. But Victoria's eyes stayed fixed on the floor, her silence a confession. The Langley's reputation, once untouchable, lay in shards, their penthouse empire exposed as a house of lies. Latoya's lips curled into a fierce grin as Patricia, her lawyer, squeezed her shoulder. "You did it," Patricia whispered, her voice steady, proud. Latoya nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and fury. The restitution, millions in damages, wouldn't erase the scars, but it was justice, hard-won and undeniable. She caught Carla's eye in the gallery, the ex-maid's hands trembling, her smile small but real. Tanya and Marla nodded, their faces alight with gratitude. James Carter stood beside her, his notebook tucked away, his eyes sharp with solidarity. "The papers are eating this up," he said, his voice low, fierce. "You're not just a story, you're a movement." Latoya's throat tightened, her nails biting into her palms, drawing blood. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a force, and the Langleys had learned it too late. As the courtroom cleared, Latoya stepped toward the exit, her sneakers silent, her shadow long and unyielding. The fight was won, but the war wasn't over. Her mother and Marcus were waiting, and she had a bigger plan brewing, a legacy to build from the ashes of this victory. "You can't buy back your soul, Victoria." Latoya Jackson's voice cut through the tense silence of the Manhattan Charity Gala, her eyes blazing as she stood on the polished stage, gripping a microphone that felt like a grenade. Victoria Langley, forced into the spotlight by the court's ruling, stood beside her, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched a prepared statement. The crowd of Manhattan's elite shifted uneasily, their champagne flutes forgotten, their whispers sharp with scandal. Latoya's pulse hammered, her jaw clenched, teeth grinding, as she faced the woman who'd branded her a thief. Her $40 million lottery win, once a secret, was now her weapon, and she was wielding it to rewrite the Langley's legacy. "I'm here to set things right," Victoria began, her voice shaky, her pearl earrings catching the stage lights like a fading crown. "I wronged Latoya Jackson, Carla Evans, Tanya Brooks, and Marla Hayes. My actions were a mistake." Her words were a forced confession, each one dragged out like a splinter from her pride. The crowd murmured, their eyes darting between Victoria and Latoya, who stood tall, her sneakers planted firmly, her presence a quiet storm. "Mistake?" Latoya interrupted, her voice sharp, a blade slicing through Victoria's facade. "You framed us. You used your power to crush black women for years to protect your daughter's crimes?" Her words landed like punches, the crowd gasping, a woman in a sequined dress clutching her necklace. Victoria's lips parted, but Latoya cut her off, her voice rising, fierce. "You don't get to call that a mistake. You get to pay for it." Victoria's hands shook, her statement crumpling in her grip. "I'm donating $5 million to a new fund," she stammered, her eyes darting to her husband Richard, who stood rigid in the crowd, his face gray with the weight of his failing empire. "The Langley Fund for Immigrant Workers, to support those I've harmed." Her voice cracked, her apology a hollow shell, but the crowd clapped, a polite veneer over their unease. Latoya's lips curled into a cold, triumphant grin. She stepped forward, her microphone raised. "That's not enough," she said, her voice steady, commanding. "You don't get to wash your hands clean with a check. I'm starting my own fund, Harlem Hope, with $10 million of my own money." The room froze, gasps rippling through the elite. "For scholarships, health care, for people like my mom, my brother, for every worker you stepped on." Her heart pounded, her mother's frail hands and Marcus's textbooks fueling her fire. The $40 million was her sword, and she was carving a new path. The crowd erupted, some clapping, others whispering, their eyes wide with shock. Reporters scrambled, their cameras flashing, capturing Latoya's defiance. Victoria's face crumpled, her hands clawing at her purse, her empire of appearances shattered. Richard stepped forward, his voice low, desperate. "Latoya, please. We're doing what you asked." "You're doing what the court ordered." Latoya shot back, her eyes locking on his, unyielding. "I'm doing what's right." She turned to the crowd, her voice a thunderclap. "Harlem Hope will lift up the people you ignored. The maids, the cleaners, the families fighting to survive. That's my legacy, not yours." Her words were a vow, her chest burning with purpose, her nails biting into her palms, drawing blood. James Carter stood in the wings, his notebook tucked away, his eyes sharp with pride. He nodded, a silent promise of support. Carla, Tanya, and Marla, the other wrong maids, stood beside him, their faces alight with gratitude, their hands clasped tight. Latoya's throat tightened, her heart swelling as she saw their strength, their shared scars. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs, and they'd won. Victoria stumbled off the stage, her heels wobbling, her breath ragged. The crowd parted, their stares cold, their whispers a chorus of judgment. Latoya stayed, her microphone lowered, her presence towering. She'd forced Victoria's hand, turned her own pain into power, and the $10 million she pledged was just the start. Harlem Hope would fund scholarships for kids like Marcus, medical care for mothers like hers, and second chances for women like Carla. Patricia, her lawyer, approached, her briefcase snapping shut with a sharp click. "You've changed the game," she said, her voice calm but fierce. "The press is calling you a hero." Latoya's lips twitched, a small, defiant smile. She wasn't a hero, she was a fighter, and the fight wasn't over. As the gala crowd dispersed, Latoya stepped off the stage, her sneakers silent, her shadow long and unyielding. She thought of the anonymous threats, Margaret's knife, Olivia's desperation. They'd tried to break her, but she'd broken them instead. Her phone buzzed, Marcus texting from home. "Mom's proud, sis. You're unstoppable." Her chest warmed, her heart steady, as she headed into the night, her mission clear. The Harlem streets stretched before her, alive with possibility, her steps a drumbeat of hope, carrying her toward a future she'd build on her own terms. Latoya Jackson's journey teaches us that true strength lies in turning pain into purpose, and family is defined by those who stand by you, not just blood. With $40 million and unyielding courage, she toppled an empire of lies and built a legacy of hope for Harlem. What did Latoya's fight spark in you? Share your thoughts or your own stories of overcoming injustice in the comments below. We're all ears. Thank you for joining us, for feeling this story with us. Drop a like, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.